Welcome everyone to this webinar. We are organizing this together with the steering committee of the FAIR4RS Research Software Group and also members of our community. We are going to present today 3 new subgroup work that we plan to carry on from September until the end of this year. My name is Paula Andrea Martinez, and I'm going to be your presenter. And today we have one of the working leads of each of the groups who are going to present what are the aims of the group and what activities are planned. So that will encourage you to join one or more of these groups. We have some notes in this tiny URL that you are welcome to have a look. Put your name if you are attending today, and also you can add questions after. We're going to check once the webinar is online. To start this, we would like to give a brief introduction about the group for the people who are joining for the first time or are watching the video online and don't know much about us. We are a group that is convened within 3 global organizations. One of them is the Research Data Alliance, the other one is Force 11, and the third one is the Research Software Alliance. With these 3 organizations, we work together to define objectives, which was coordinating a range of existing community-led discussions around FAIR for research software. Our first objective was to define the principles for FAIR for research software. And our second objective is to achieve the adoption of these principles. This second objective is the one linked to the subgroups that are going to start now. We have 3 important milestones in our working group. We are defined to be completing them at the end of a year and a half. So we've completed the first milestone, which is defining the FAIR principles, and now we are working into finding and creating new implementation guidelines and adoption examples. This is information that anyone can have a look in our case statement, which is also listed in this slide. How do we go about coming together to our current outputs? We did similar efforts at the one that it's going to start now. We did other subgroups with defined activities and a defined time. One of them was to have a fresh look about the FAIR for research software, examining the context of research software from scratch. So it was a really important discussion, and from here there is a paper that you can access via the link, and it was led by Daniel Katz. The second one was looking at FAIR in other contexts. So for example, workflows, notebooks, and training materials, and how the environment is growing here around FAIR. This was a short subgroup led by Michelle Barker. The third subgroup and the numbers of these groups are in no way ordered by importance, are just different numbers. It was the discussion about defining what is research software, and we needed this discussion to be able to apply the FAIR principles to this definition. And this group was led by Moran Group Pinter. And the fourth one was the review of research related to FAIR software since 2019. So that was the milestone when we have access to towards FAIR principles for research software, an important paper, and from then on, other papers have been written and reviewed by group number 4, led by Neil Chuhorn. After we had these 4 subgroups working in parallel, we completed our first outcome and our first milestone that it's listed in the Research Data Alliance with the DOI that you can see on the screen. It is kind of a preprint where we discuss the FAIR principles for research software. After all the work that it's been put in the community, this output has been reviewed twice by the community, and we've incorporated the comments from there on. And we're still going through the last revision before we finalize this output. With the results of this, we would like to go into implementation and finding case examples. So the next 3 groups are going to base their work on that. And we'll continue to discuss what the aims of those groups are. So I'd like to invite Sandra Hessing to present subgroup number 5 about adoption guidelines.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paula. Yeah, I'm Sandra Gesing, and I'm one of the leads on the subgroup 5, also together with Paula and Lila and Chris Edman. So this is really, we have the aim to identify, create, and review existing resources, because one thing is that we created with this working group already a great resource for FAIR for research software, but in parallel, a couple of different resources already developed. And we want to run it really now from September until December to collect information and material. And if you go to the next slide, Paula. Thank you. So what is really important now to look what groups already worked on. And we have here 4 examples. And we collect that also during the whole time until December, what kind of material is, really targeting software especially, and looking maybe already at tools. And we would like to see tools. A lot of these tools will go in the subgroup 6, but if we can already collect where people are creating tools or applications, APIs, that would be very helpful to see. And then also to look, if we have all these different guidelines already, and also, for example, they are very different from from their aspect. So if Paula, if you click on the first URL, for example, that is the RDA. Can you click it? Otherwise, yeah, it's not necessary. If you go back, yeah. For example, the top 10 FAIR data and software things looked all over domains of different domains, as well as the FAIR software EU and how FAIR is. It looks really at software, while, for example, the data and software sharing guidance for author submitting to AGU journals gives really good guidance for AGU, and looks also in very specific domain repositories, for example, and domain data and software packages. RescueTeam is also then again something that is generic and not directly focused on different domains or on one domain. And so I think all of them together give really already a start of guidelines, but it's important to see how we can create new guidelines and encourage also that the existing guidelines and tools can be incorporated with more FAIR for research principles in their work. So the idea is really to get also new guidelines, see community feedback, and publish these new guidelines. We probably, at the end really of December or beginning of January, that would be a goal to have something like a white paper, and really also inform subgroup 6. And with that, I would give it to subgroup 6.
Thank you, Sandra. And I invite Daniel Katz to present subgroup 6.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, yeah, thanks. So subgroup 6 is looking at adoption primarily. And so we want to look at different groups that are going to either adopt or encourage adoption or stimulate adoption. And so what we're thinking of at this point is working with software projects, ideally some small number of software projects, maybe some high profile projects that want to commit to following the FAIR for research software guidelines in their software development work. Organizations that could be national organizations or disciplinary organizations or specific institutions that are willing to adopt the FAIR for research software guidelines for their members or their employees, again, depending on what kind of organization it is. and with funders or other stakeholders who can encourage, well, in the case of funders, who can encourage people with their funding to adopt the FAIR for Research software guidelines. So, for example, a funder that is funding software projects could require that those software projects make their software fair as part of a grant or an award. So that's I would say the first thing is to work with those different kinds of groups. And then the second part, which is number 4 here, is to document what we learn and to provide examples so that the lessons from these groups then can be shared across the community and can be used by other similar groups within the community. I think that's it for Paula.
Thank you, Dan. And then we have the third subgroup, or subgroup number 7, about governance, and I invite Tom Honeyman to present.
Thanks, Paula. Next slide, thanks. So subgroup 7 is in the context of the recommendations being close to completed and adoption starting to arise. The primary task of this group is to work up a communications plan and content that clarifies the governance structure to the community from the release onwards. And that clarification is just really there to help the facilitation in case there are any unanticipated concerns that come up as people try to adopt them. Next slide, thanks. We're going to break this work down into 4 separate tasks. The first is that we need some standard text that clarifies the ownership of the principles. And I put that in scare quotes because this is really a community-owned effort. And let me say from the outset that this group is not the governance mechanism. It is clarifying the governance mechanisms for raising concerns or seeking changes in the principles, should there need to be any changes. It will provide a timeline for reviews in the event that they are needed. And in being particularly forward-thinking, we might perhaps also provide a mechanism to retire the principles. If, for instance, in a number of years' time, some larger new acronym comes along and we want to signal that some other work is where we'd like to draw people's attention from that point onwards. The second task is to define expected uses and to clarify the mechanisms for providing any additional guidance. The third is to define the relationships between the FAIR4RS principles and other objects that may seem related to it, including the original FAIR principles and other similar activities as well. And the fourth task is just, again, to compose that standard text and to ensure that it is consistently available across the different channels within the FAIR4RS group. As noted at the beginning, this is a multi-institutional effort, and we just want to make sure that it's really clear to people who are engaging with the FAIR4RS principles for the first time that there is a consistent message about where those principles are, how to raise concerns, or as people go about adopting them, if they note anything that's particularly bad that was unanticipated, that they have avenues for raising concerns and seeking those changes. So that's me done. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you everyone else who presented today. So the next is how people can participate from the subgroups. We have in the notes that are being shared in the chat, the URL for the working document. So you can see that also in the slides. And let me find that. So in this big URL here, tiny URL, FAIR4RS --9-SG-webinar, there's where you have all the links to registering for any of the groups. You can add your questions there for any of the groups. We'll have some time to answer here with the leads, but for those of you who are watching the recorded webinar, I recommend you type any questions that you have in that document or contact us directly. We also have many other community engagement activities with the group, and we recommend you to have a look at our community engagement page, where we are presenting the outputs and the progress of the group at different events. If you haven't yet joined the RDA group, where we have our communications channel, please join through RDA, and the group is FAIR for Research Software. And the form is also linked there. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who's contributing so far to the group. We have about 220 members, and we are acknowledged present and past steering committee members for coordinating a wide range of activities. And we also acknowledge the Alfred's Foundation and the Wellcome Trust for financial support of some of the activities. Now I'll stop recording, and I'll see if anyone has questions. I mean, I'll stop the sharing. Does anyone have a burning question that we can answer today, or any final comments from any of the leads?
So maybe just that we plan regular meetings. So from September now, the frequency is not totally clear. Paula, I think we talked about bi-weekly, but we didn't really set dates yet. So we will send information around about that.
Yeah, for people who register to the subgroups, we are preparing different mailing lists, and that's going to be organized with each lead. Yes, Tom.
So I was going to say for subgroup 7 on governance, we'll mostly be working in an asynchronous fashion because we are mostly about drafting content in that particular group. So if you're looking for one with not a lot of meetings, not to compete or anything, but that is the way that we intend to run that group.
Yeah, from past activities, I can recommend joining the groups because it's not taking too much of your time. We did accounted for asynchronous meetings, and we have a lot of documentation to search. Even if you give one example, that is a good input you can provide to the groups.
Yeah, Paula, that is a good hint that everyone can decide how much they want to contribute. So if you sign up and register, it's not that you register now, you know, you're like, oh, every 2 weeks you have to come to the meeting. And no, it's about, you know, contributions, and any contribution is very welcome.
Okay, just aware of time. If there's no more questions, I'll stop the recording. We can have a chat if you want. I think 20 minutes is good.